A third straight day of protests in Philadelphia. The National Guard is now patrolling the streets after protesters outnumbered city and state police there over the weekend. MSNBC host Eamon Moildeen in Philadelphia. And Eamon, what is it like there now?
So, Alison, let me set the scene for you a little bit. We're at the very tail end of a very large march that has been taking place now for a better part of the hour. This is a protest that started outside the police headquarters of the city of Philadelphia. And at this time, you can actually see the demonstrators very peaceful, extremely calm, I would say. There have definitely been some moments of tension when they were in the city center a little bit. The police there has been kind of shepherding this crowd to make them go in a certain direction. But outside of the Pennsylvania Convention Center, there was a tense moment a little bit where the protesters gathered together, took a knee, and encouraged the police to take a knee with them. Now, the protests, as I mentioned, been very peaceful, multiracial. We've seen young and old. In fact, I've seen some folks out here with their kids out here demonstrating against police brutality, demanding justice and accountability for the killing of unarmed black people, including George Floyd. So that has been the scene that we've witnessed. Now, it comes against the backdrop of a tense few days in Philadelphia. The city has imposed a curfew for another night. That is expected to take place at around 6 p.m. The commissioner here is saying there have been about 429 arrests. There have been some acts of vandalism as well. Obviously, the major concern has been the looting. And that has been the challenge for both officials as well as the protesters, to try to keep those two groups of people very different. The large peaceful demonstration that you see here continuing to march peacefully, but then there is always concern about the looting, and that is the concern when night falls. So we'll see what happens tonight if, in fact, the curfew is abided by a lot of the folks here. But for the most part, everything we've seen today, with the exception of that tense standoff that I mentioned, and an incident where a vehicle drove through the crowds, was a very scary moment. Not sure exactly what happened there, but certainly something that agitated the protesters when a vehicle apparently refused to stop. As you can see, they're marching right through a lot of the major roads in the heart of Philadelphia. So, Alison, a very peaceful march that continues, as you can see.
Eamon, we hope that it stays that way. I'd like to ask a question about the president. He singled out Philadelphia as a mess on a conference call with the nation's governors earlier today. How is the mayor of Philly reacting to that?
Yeah, the mayor of Philadelphia was very straightforward. He just said President Trump is a mess. He did not, and you can hear some of the crowd here as well, not too happy with President Trump. So, yeah, to echo what you were asking about, though, the president tweeting out that Philadelphia was a mess, and the mayor did not mince his words, saying President Trump's tweet, his rhetoric was not helpful. And right now, it's officials here concerned about the city of Philadelphia. It almost seemed as if they were pretty much tuning the president out.
All right, Eamon Moildeen in Philadelphia, thank you so much. It has been 1 week since George Floyd was killed. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been charged with third-degree murder after kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 8 minutes. Analysis done by NBC News found that Minneapolis police used neck restraints like the one that killed Floyd 237 times over the last 5 years. Of those 237 times, 44 people were rendered unconscious. NBC News justice correspondent Pete Williams joins me now. And Pete, what can you tell us about this analysis?
Well, it's surprisingly consistent with the policy of the Minneapolis Police Department. Their policy explicitly says that officers can use neck restraints as long as it's not on the front and as long as it doesn't impact the windpipe, but that force can be applied to the back of the neck or the side of the neck or to the back, either to get somebody into a position where they're compliant, where they're no longer resisting, or if there is a physical danger, even to the point of rendering that person unconscious. Now, the police department has made it very clear that it did not teach or sanction or approve in any way of the technique that was used by the officer who's now been charged with murder and manslaughter in this Floyd case of putting a knee on his neck. You know, for 25 years, the Justice Department has urged police not to put pressure on people's backs or their necks, even though arresting people and putting them face down and then handcuffing them is very common. It probably happens 500,000 times every year for police around the country to try to get people under control. But the advice to police is, once you have them under control, once they're on the ground and cuffed, roll them over or get them to sit up so you don't impact their breathing.
Pete, an independent autopsy out today showed that George Floyd died of asphyxiation. You mentioned this, but law enforcement officials told NBC News that restraining people by kneeling on their necks is not taught or sanctioned by police. How are law enforcement officials characterizing this tactic?
Well, you've got two factors here in the Floyd case. You've got the officer himself, which you can, we've clearly seen that repeatedly in this video. What you can't see from this view is the other officers that are next to the officer with his knee on Floyd's neck, who are also putting pressure on his back. You combine all that together, and that is what the independent autopsy said today undoubtedly contributed to the fact that he was having trouble breathing. So you've got somebody in this prone position, nearly flat on their stomachs, with somebody with pressure on the neck and then pressure on the back, and all of that adds up to making it very hard for someone to breathe. Now, the original autopsy results that were cited in the criminal complaint against the police officer you see there with his knee on Floyd's neck said that they couldn't determine that it was asphyxia, which is, somebody can't breathe. Then there may have been other contributing causes like underlying health concerns. This independent autopsy today said, no, it wasn't underlying health concerns. It was the fact that he couldn't breathe.
Pete, I'd like to ask you about the prosecution in this case. Minnesota's Attorney General is taking over. One officer, as we've said, Derek Chauvin, has been charged with third-degree murder, but 3 other officers were involved. What does it mean now that this has been elevated to the state level?
So he's taking over because the governor has ordered him to take the case over. He is, of course, the former congressman, and he is somebody that the family and the community wanted to take this case. Rightly or wrongly, they said they did not trust the local county prosecutor. They felt that the county prosecutor had a record of not very aggressively pursuing police misconduct, so they wanted this case to be handled by someone else. Even the local prosecutor was saying that these other police officers might face charges. And experts on policing that I have talked to say it's really quite surprising that none of them, even not only the people kneeling there, but none of the ones that were standing around tried to intervene and tried to say to the officer, okay, enough, back off.
Pete Williams, always great to have you with us. Thank you so much for walking us through that analysis.
You bet.
And a programming note for you tomorrow, NBC News Now and NBC BLK present Can You Hear Us Now? A conversation hosted by MSNBC's Tremaine Lee after the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and with the backdrop of the protests, the riots, and the civil unrest across our country. Tremaine will moderate discussions on race, what being black in America means today, and how America can help heal the divide. Watch tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern on NBC News Now.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.